the iPad, the computer, the TV, our friends, our family, right? We all get influences from different sources information. And again, some are positive and some not so positive. Some can be pretty hurtful or pretty negative. I can remember a lot of times growing up and my mom going, Steve, you better not hang out with that kid because he's a bad influence on you. And right now he's probably my best friend. So yeah, maybe he was a bad influence, but we sure had a fun ride for the last 50 plus years. So yes, he probably was a bad influence looking back on our lives, but he's probably one of my better influences just from a person. So we all have these influences in our lives. Coaches. I can remember my son loving football when he was little, and he had a horrible coach, and now he is the least competitive kid in the world because of a bad experience with a coach. And as us as leaders, we have to have positive influence with the people that are in our influential sphere. And if you think about it, and some of you are leaders, some of you, this is a leadership series, but some of you are saying, I don't lead anyone. I'm not a people manager. And I'm going to challenge you a little bit. Is John Maxwell says that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So I'm going to challenge you that we are all leaders because we all have influence with others, right? And we have influence all around our daily lives. In fact, they say we influence on average about 40,000 people in our lifetime, and we have 40,000 people influencing us. So you can imagine the compounding effect that influence has on us. So you have to think about that. Is I want to be a positive influence on your family, yourself. You're probably the hardest. I know I'm the hardest person to have influence over, right? I'm the easiest person to influence. Sometimes you look at that mirror and I go, yeah, not today, Steve, right? And that's that negative influence on that I have on myself. But your family, your friends, your spouse, your neighbors, your community, your chamber community, your business, your customers, your clients. You see, we always have influence with others, and we are always leading with others. So that's what I love about when John talks. He said, influence is nothing more, or leadership is nothing more than influence. And it's so true because leadership is nothing to do with position or title. It always is about how much influence you have with others, not over others, because over others is manipulation, but with others. And how do you grow a follower, a following in a cause that whatever that cause is. So think about this: is who do you influence today? Think about in your normal lives and your day to day, your hour by hour, who is it that you influence? Is it your coworker? Is it your boss? Is it your people that you might be a people leader and you're influencing through them? Is it your, like I said, your family, your wife, your husband, your children? My kids have lots of influence over me. I think it was my hair color, having 5 kids in a blended family from 25 to 16. So yeah, they have a lot of influence on me, right? And I have a lot of influence on them. And we have to think about this as we are kind of working our circle of influence and expanding our circle of influence. And the way I look at influence is, again, just adding value to others. It's really if you come from an approach of adding value to others, that's really how you gain influence, and that's really how you grow influence. And I'm going to talk a little bit later about some steps that you can take to increase your influence. But I really want to have this discussion around who do you influence. And what I want you to do is, if you got a pen and a piece of paper, or whatever, I want you to, and I've kind of broke my arm this week. I slipped on some ice. Go figure. I'm a ski instructor. I've been a skiing for 52 years. I've been a ski instructor for probably 35 of those years. I have never broken a bone in my body, other than maybe once a couple broken noses playing baseball. But I walk out to get coffee and I end up with this thing. So I'm going to try to do this exercise with a broken wrist. But so what I want you to do is, just whatever you have to write on, is put a big dot in the middle of a piece of paper. So there's my dot. Okay. And that dot represents you. Okay. And like I said, we are the hardest people to lead. We're our biggest self-critics. We are our biggest naysayers. We have this thing in our head I call the BS system, right? And it really is BS, but it really stands for belief systems. And sometimes we listen to these limiting BS systems in our head, and we have influence over ourselves. And for me, like I said, that is by far the hardest person to lead is myself. And I have to be intentional about leading myself, because if you don't lead yourself, you can't lead others, and you can't have influence with others. So I have to start with me. And I love this exercise because it really is the center of the circle is that dot. That's you. And now what I want you to do is take an arrow and draw it down. So again, my very poor penmanship with a cast. Just think about, okay, what does that arrow represent? That arrow represents is who is under you. And I'm not saying that there's position and under, but who are you leading today? Who's following you? Is it your spouse? Is it your kids? Is it your family? I also think about that arrow as who's younger than you? Who can you influence that might be new early in the career, or someone that's in high school, or someone who's college that you can take a look at? So again, when we think about influence, we want to think this about as a circle. And in this exercise, I do this quite often. I do these talks a lot, but I do this exercise when I'm kind of in a season of my life and I say, okay, I've got some really good information that I want to, share with others. Who in that down arrow can I have influence with? So not only is it you imparting your influence on them, and again, this is nothing to do with manipulation. This is just you have a connection with these people and you're sharing and adding value to each other. But also, as you look at yourself and you want to grow yourself and have influence to yourself, who in that arrow pointing down can I get value from? Can I get influence from? Maybe there's a new idea of someone that you run into that just first time on the job, and they're kind of new to the world, and they look around and say, well, why do we do it that way? I've never seen anything done that way. And it's amazing when a fresh set of eyes to come in and you say, wow, I never saw that because I've been here for 20 years, right? We've been doing it the same way. So think about that down arrow it's kind of a two-way arrow. It's not me or you pushing down or influencing down. It's more of a looking down. And how can I influence with the people that again are maybe younger than me, or I lead or follow, but how do I look down and get influence back from them? Okay. Now, the next thing I want you to do is put an arrow to the left and the right. So it's going to look like that. And now, again, everything starts with me or you. So now we want to look to the left and right. Who is my peers? Who is on my right? Who is on my left? How can I have influence with them? And a lot of times in business and corporate world, Steve, I don't want to have influence of my peer. He or she's my competitor. If I have influence with them, I'm going to set them up for promotion that I may not get. And I say, BS, that's your limiting belief, because all of us are smarter than one of us. Why not have influence with your peers? Because it's the end goal of the game of the company that you work with, or the department you're with. But you really need to look left and right and have influence again with your peers. But it's not only your influence out to them. What can you learn? What can you get value from our peers on our left and right? So think about this. We're looking down, we're looking left, we're looking right, and it's all about that two-way street of adding value to each other. How can I add value to my peer? How can my peer add value to me? How can I get that piece of wisdom from someone on either side of me that says, now I just grew myself one step, and or I broke through that leadership lid. And a lot of us have that leadership lid in our head. It's that negative BS system. So I'm always telling people, look around you, because there's influence everywhere. Find the good ones. There are some bad ones out there. Stay away from the bad ones. But every bad influence to me is a learning opportunity. Like if you found bad influence and whatever that situation is, I'll tell you what, that's wisdom because that's experience. It's knowledge of, hey, that goes against my values or that goes against my core beliefs. I'll tell you what, that those are powerful learning state opportunities, just as a good influence person is. And then lastly, what I want you to do, or not lastly, but next, I want you to do a draw an arrow up. I'm sure you guys guessed this, right? Pretty easy. So not only we look down, left, right, but we have to look up. Who's leading me? Who do I get influence from? Again, that could be if you're in a big company, it could be the CEO, it could be your boss, it could be, someone of power, it could be anything. When you're looking up, is how do I get influence from that person above me? But more importantly, again, is you're pulling down, but you also need to push up. You need to say, how can I influence the people that are leading me or the people that are higher in an organization? And again, leadership has nothing to do with position, but in corporate world and business world, there is people that own the business, the owners, there's the CEOs, there's these executives, but how can I influence them, right? How can I influence them for the people in my left and rights and the people that are following me? Because a lot of times when in corporate world, right, you've got people at the executive levels may not know the people that you're leading, and they may not understand or really have a connection with the people that you're leading. You do. So if you can help influence the leaders above you for the people that you're leading, man, you want to talk about powerful. So the next thing I want you to do is just draw a circle, small circle around your arrows. And that is called your circle of influence. And you can see that I drew it pretty small because when we're first learning about becoming a person of influence, your circle of influence can be pretty small because a lot of times people just look down, or they might look left and right, or they may only look up. So that sphere or that circle of influence or sphere of influence can be pretty small. But as you become a better person of influence and you start looking further down, further left, further right, further up, you can see now how your circle of influence keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And really, when you can have a very large circle of influence, it's amazing what happens because it's not all about you. It's about that circle having significant impact. Like I said, all of us are pretty smart. One of us is pretty smart, but us in a group, man, we can change the world, right? And I think that's because when we have influence with each other, we influence for the great, we have a positive mindset of influence. It's just amazing what can happen. I've seen it personally. I've seen it I don't know, about 5 years, or not even that, 4 or 5 years. My daughter struggles with her mental health, and I was in a pretty dark spot. I was in a pretty vulnerable spot, and she was hospitalized. And my circle of influence was me and my wife, and I didn't have that community around me to influence me until I got to know a few guys that I've hung out with and that were very positive influences in an organization I'm with. And it was amazing that 6 months change of what happened to me on the inside. Now she still struggles with it. It doesn't go away, but I'll tell you what, I have a strong circle of influence of close guys that I can hang out and spill my heart to, and they are adding value to me. They are here to support me. And I really think that's really what influence is about. It is about really just adding value to others. So again, you might have different circles of influence. You might have your friend's circle of influence. You might have your family circle of influence. Of course, you get the crazy brother-in-law that's out and out in the middle of the woods. They might be way out in that circle of influence, but they still are in your circle of influence. And then you have, like I said, your community circle of influence. You have your chamber circle of influence that you guys have on these calls. So we might have different circles of influences, but if you start laying some of these out, and sometimes I do, sometimes it's pretty fun to see who is in my circle of influence, just because I get bored some days. I don't know. It's kind of, I guess it's the engineer in me wants to see it graphically, right? But it's pretty wild to see a lot of the intersections, because you can start overlaying these circles and say, wow, this person's in 4 or 5 of them, and how does this person affect me in different ways? So when we influence, right, we can have positive influence, we can have negative influence, and we got to be careful of that. We're always on the positive influence side, because a lot of times people influence by pure intimidation, right? My way or the highway. Anyone have a manager or a leader that way? Yeah, I had lots of them, and boy, are they fun to work for. They're horrible, right? It's this. You either see it my way or I'm not talking to you or whatever. So unfortunately, there are a lot of people in the world that think that intimidation or force or a mindset of, hey, I'm your boss, you better listen to me, whatever. Sometimes we have to have intimidating influence with our kids, right? If, let's say, they're doing something that's not right and it's a safety issue, it's really, it's like, grab them, right? You can't do that. You're in trouble. How well does that work, right? Those kids go like, at least my kids, giving me the one finger salute and off they go, at least in their head. But I think as leaders, and again, leaders are just not positioned, and leaders just have influence. We have to come in with a serving mindset. We have to come from a serving posture of, how do I add value to you, and how do I help you maybe go higher than me? Maybe you go higher in whatever your aspiration. How can I help you? And when you come with that posture, people tend to just gravitate you and kind of latch onto you, because human beings and our brains are pretty hardwired to ask 3 things. Does this person care about me? Do they listen? Do they understand me? And how can this person help me? And it's just intrinsic in our brains that's what we're always thinking. It's just the way our brains are wired. But if we are latched onto someone that can answer those 3, they have great influence with us, and we want to grow with them, because we know they're going to bring us along. So it's that posture of adding value, not intimidation or manipulation or force or any of those bad influences. And I think we've all experienced the good and the bad. Unfortunately, probably more bad than good in some cases, but they are there. And I'm not saying that you'll never run into them. We always will. But again, you just use them as learning experiences. So if I think about it, there's 5 levels, and I've been kind of alluding to this. There's 5 levels of influence. And the first one is positional leaders or positional influence. And we're all there when we start a new job, or we become a new manager or a new director, or a new leader in by title. We're all kind of positional leaders at the time. And we are also positional leaders with our kids. It's parent-child kind of relationship. We are in a positional leader. The problem with positional leadership is that people don't really know us that well. They may not trust us at all, or they may not even like us, right? But they just have to follow you because you're their boss or you're their business world leader. Again, people don't have to like you. They don't have to follow you. And the challenge that I see in a lot of the world is people get stuck in this positional leadership or positional influence that says, my business card or my email signature says this, and I'm going to lead because I am this, right? And I'm the owner of the company and you guys better listen to me. Or I am the boss, or I'm the manager, or I'm this, I'm that. That's not influence. Again, that's positional leader, very low level. But we have to keep in mind, we all start there. In any new circle of influence, we have positional influence, right? Until people get to know you, get to like you, and get to trust you, do you start moving up to the next leadership level or the influence level. So again, a challenge to you is don't get stuck in positional leaders. Don't get stuck on the title. Don't get stuck in a position. Get stuck on moving up the influence. Because what happens when you get stuck in positional leadership, this little dot never expands. This little dot doesn't have 4 arrows. It's just a dot, and it's a very self-centered dot. But again, we all start there in a new role. Your job is to get out of that pretty quick, and that's to move to the next level of influence. And then the next level of influence is called permission influence, where people know you, they like you. They might like you, but they like you enough, but they trust you. And now they give you permission to have influence with them. They come to you and ask for guidance. They come to you and ask that you care about them, or they know that you may help them, or at least, have an opportunity to help them. So we want to quickly move from positional to permission, and we got to have connections with people. We got to have people know, like, and trust us. But that permission level, again, is really call it level 2, still pretty low level of influence. People just come to you because, again, they know, like, and trust you, and they know that you can possibly help them. Now, the third level is really around results. It's called production influence. And this is because you have results. You've helped people, you've added people. There's social proof, call it, or there's proof in your organization that you've helped, X group or Lynn from accounting. There's proof out there that you have the results. So you are who you say you are, and you have the results to prove it. Now people are like, okay, they really know you, they really like you, and they really start to trust you, is because they know that you can get that production done or that results done. So they come to you as a leader, as a person of influence, because you have results. You have results of adding value to others. So third level is pretty high, and I would say 70, whatever, anytime you name a stat, it's wrong. So call it 75% of people just stay at level 3. And that's okay, because you have results, you're adding value to other, you have followers, and maybe pretty deep, maybe it's now a sphere. So it's okay to be at level 3. But when you really become level 4, is really about producing others. Okay, it's about people reproduction. So you're helping people not only grow themselves, but you're reproducing other leaders and other peoples of influence. So you are adding so much value to them. They are going off and leading someone else and having influence and becoming that person of influence. And you're building their circle of influence or their sphere to a bigger and wider. So you're actually reproducing. And these people are still probably in your circle of influence. They know, like, and trust you. You can probably, on those little circle diagrams, map right where they are, right? And this is a very high level. It takes a lot of skill, and it takes a lot of wisdom and a lot of knowledge to kind of get to that level, because you have to grow yourself inside to really get to that level. So you have to break through your own kind of influence lid and your own personal growth lids to get to that level, because you can only take someone to as far as you've gone. So if you're here, you're only going to bring someone up to this level, right? But if you're here, you can now start bringing them up higher and having them reproduce. And the 5th level is really the pinnacle leader influence. people that may not even be in your influence or circle of influence or your sphere of influence, they flock to you because you're knowing their production. They know that you become now this ladder extender, right? Instead of a ladder climber or a ladder holder for people, you're now extending this ladder to let people climb higher than you, and they're not in your circle of influence, but they know you from other people. You don't even know them, and they are flocking to you as someone that really admire and really have high influence. Now, there's very few people that have that level 5 influence, but it's something to build towards. If you, as this is your passion to become a person of value that values others, that's your end game. That's your goal. It's hard to get there because it takes a lot of growing from the inside to be better on the outside. But I'll tell you what, there's some people that are in my now circle of influence that I track down. They didn't know me, but I track this individual down and I meet with them once or twice a month because of his knowledge and wisdom. So, how do you become a person of influence? So I've kind of taken influence and broken it up into a little bit of an acrostic. It just helps me, but it also helps you. And what really is influence? If you're saying, I don't know what a person of influence is, well, here it is. You have integrity with people. You are who you are behind closed doors, behind the lights, lights are off. You have integrity. You have integrity with people. People see and know that you have integrity. And nurturing, you nurture others. You build up them. You care for them. You have a caring mindset with them. A lot of people that don't have influence skip this one, like, I don't care about them. They're below me. Well, person of influence nurtures others. F, we have faith in others. We have faith that people can be who they are, the best they are. They might be in a terrible situation, but we have faith that they're trying their best in the situation they're in. We have faith in ourselves. So we have faith in ourselves. We have faith in other people. Listening, L. So we need to listen to others. If we're going to add value to others, we want to make sure that we're listening to them. And then I'm not saying listen and be on your phone, have multiple screens up, or you're kind of looking over what's going on in the park. Actually listen. I always told my kids, you always listen with your eyes. Like the adage says, you have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 1 mouth, use them appropriately. I always like to say, my grandfather used to say, you have 2 hands and 2 feet. Walk to them, reach out to them, and listen to them with your eyes and ears. So that's a big thing of becoming a person of influence. So next one is understanding people. Understanding people have seasons in their life and situations that they might be in that are causing them to have some limiting BS in their head or limiting belief system. So it's having that understanding of not only who people are, but what they're feeling, what their emotional state is at that point. Why are they reacting this way? Validate that they have a concern. Just know, whatever. But if you validate, you show a sense of understanding with them. E, again, enlarging people. So we want to enlarge people. We want to grow their sphere. We want to grow their knowledge, their skill, because becoming a person of influence is just skill. That's all it is. It's a skill. It's a leadership. It's a skill. There's no natural born leaders. It's a skill of enlarging people. So if as a person of influence, we need to enlarge others. N, navigate for others. Sometimes we got to tread the bad waters with them. We got to be the paddler. We got to be, if anyone's done whitewater rafting, we used to go down on whitewater on the gully and the New all the time. And, you had one guide and the rest of us were just, probably hungover people trying to paddle and missing it. The guide really got us through these rapids. And I think as a person of influence, sometimes we got to say, get in a boat, let me paddle. I'll get us through this. Especially with COVID and all this craziness that's going on. Sometimes us as leaders just need to say, I'm navigating you for this. I know where we're going. there might be a sense of uncertainty over there. We don't know what that rapid looks like, but we're in the boat together and I'm going to help you. Connecting with people. I think as a person of influence, if you don't have a connection with people, you might as well just stop right there, because nothing else is going to come in this. In fact, if this was an acrostic, I would put C first, because if you don't have a connection with people, you can't have influence with them. They don't know you, they don't like you, they don't trust you. And that's at the core of connection. People got to know, like, and trust you. You have to have that servant heart. You have to add that value add to them. Next one, empower people. Yeah, you got to navigate some rivers with them, but empower your people to do it for themselves, because they will learn faster if you're not doing everything for them. Right? My daughter's taking driver's ed. She's 17. I think that's, well, I had gray hair before that, but it's probably a heck of a lot grayer now. But she's like, Dad, I don't want to do this. Can you drive home? It's snowing. Nope. And we got to go through a construction zone, and we're taking a long way down the 75 or 59, and we're going to do 5 roundabouts, right? Now, if I drove that all the time for her, am I empowering her to learn how to drive? It sure makes my drive home a lot less stressful, but I don't give her the skill or the knowledge to get through those when I'm not sitting in the car. Because when we have people of influence and we're influencing people, they're not always sitting right next to us, right? They might be away from us, and we have to make sure that we as leaders empower the people that we have influence with to find out, knowing that they may trip and fall. It's okay, because we have faith in them. And I added an R, because we are an influencer, that we have to reproduce others. We have to reproduce others to grow their circles of influence. And we have to reproduce other leaders, not from our own mindsets and not from our own ways, because that's manipulation, but to see for the bigger picture. So my big challenge to you today, come to a position or a viewpoint of posture. Strive for posture of adding value to others, to have influence with others, and do not come from a place of position. So what'd you think?
Thank you, Steve. You always bring just the right size golden nugget to take away and apply into the day. We have plenty of time for questions and discussion, and that's where I want to spend a lot of time, because I feel like we get so much out of these sessions when we hear from others. It's a great chance to learn from each other, and we had so much great commentary in the chat. So if you weren't paying attention to the chat, go back and read some of those takeaways. But what questions do you guys have? And if we don't have any questions, I have some questions for you.
And just so there is a book that I was kind of teaching out of. I add a lot of my own personal, but this is a really, if you wanted to read a book, this is a good book. It's on Amazon, it's on Kindle, it's on whatever, Audible.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Becoming a Person of Influence by John Maxwell. And a lot of the teachings I did. So the influencer acrostic is this entire book. So if you want to know, hey, I don't know how to listen to people, well, there's 33 pages in this chapter that'll go help you listen. So this book, as you can see, is pretty ripped up. This is version 9 of this book, because I have gone through this book so many times and have learned so much every time. I literally, like Brianna just said, there's so many nice sized golden nuggets of knowledge, even though I've read it 9 times. So.
Yeah, and I love that it's a book that you can refer to in that way, because we all go through different seasons. We all struggle with things at different times in our life. So like you said, if you're struggling with listening, go to the listening. It's not a book necessarily that you have to read front to back, but really just hone in on what you're trying to work on and focus on. A big part of this series is going to be taking your personal development, taking ownership and accountability for that. And like Steve said earlier, leadership, we hear natural born leader all the time, but it really is a skill that we have to continuously focus on And it's intimidating to focus on everything at once. And we don't need to work on some aspects of leadership as much as we do others. So that's a great book. And in the Leadership Toolbox, a link to that will be included. So we've got some great comments coming in, no questions. I'm going to throw out a question to you guys though, and please feel free to come off of mute if you're brave enough. If you don't want to, you can go ahead and type it in the chat. But I want to know, we did the exercise, we talked about our circle of influence. In what way are you looking to grow your circle of influence? So is it, going down like Steve walked us through, or side to side, or is it pushing up and breaking that ceiling? What ways are you guys looking to grow your influence?
Influence over the coffee maker, maybe?
Brianna, I'll talk.
Yeah, thank you.
I think the upward influence for me in particular, because I'm a person that tends to shy away from, those above me and think that maybe, since they've been there and they've done it, that they have more knowledge, over a certain situation, and that my influence really doesn't bring much to their table. But I think getting out of that mindset and realizing that I do have things that could add value to them while they add value to me is something that is something I'd like to work on.
Absolutely. And you said it yourself, Jessica, we all have not only the ability, but the responsibility to lead. And part of that responsibility to our leaders is keeping them in, your day-to-day. Like Steve said, they might not have time to get to know everyone on your team. They might not know the inner workings of, your individual role, but being able to share that and help influence both ways, that's a really great point. We had one question come in here while Jessica was talking. Steve, Donna asked, does adding values to others mean helping them see themselves as value adders?
Absolutely. That's that reproducing others. And I think if as me as a person of value that values others, and if that person I have influence with doesn't see themselves as an added value adder, then I'm not doing it right. Mm-hmm. So I really have to think about, okay, what am I missing? How can I go from this ladder climber into a ladder holder? So I'm holding it to really kind of get this person to extend themselves to be bigger value adders. I mean, absolutely, you nailed that question. That's a question that I think in the back of my head is daily. And I think there was another question I saw pop up is, what did I mean about a posture? And that question is exactly it. Is that posture of my posture? So posture could be the way I stand, could be the way I think, the way I carry myself. But that question is something I ask every day. If I'm a person of value that values others and they don't see themselves as a value adder, or they don't see value in themselves, then that falls on me as someone of influence that I'm not doing my job. And that really is that posture where you can lean into it and say, okay, how can I help you? You are a value adder. How can I help you get there? What do you need from me? And you kind of get into this coaching relationship almost with them. And I'm not saying a formal, like, sign a contract, here's your coaching, right. But you're now mentoring that person to become that. And maybe it's as simple as, maybe you need to know yourself to grow yourself. Maybe it's a personal development where there might be some limiting beliefs in their head, like those BS things that go on in their head that are limiting them to say, well, I just can't add value to this person because I don't really know them, or I'm not confident myself. Well, guess what? Maybe, again, that could be a personal development lid that they're hitting, that you can say, how can I help you break through that lid? Because on the other side of that lid is breakthrough. It's really crossing. A lot of times what I've seen, and this is a long answer, I'm sorry, but I'm passionate about this, is that inside it's that terror barrier, right? It's that fear barrier that we all hit and go, oh, I don't want to break through that. And I can't get there. And I got 2 words for you. On the other side of yes is unbelievableness. And I know that's not a word, but that's a word I use all the time. On the other side of yes is awesome. And on the other side of fear is breakthrough. And if we can get them to kind of get through that terror barrier and see the other side of yes, see the other side of fear, it's amazing what happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I attended a seminar in December, I think, where we talked a lot about the fear barrier, and we talked a lot about self-talk. So, you know, we think to ourselves, well, what's the worst that can happen? And then all we're thinking about are the possible worst scenarios. So switching that self-talk to what's the best that could happen, and think about all of the good and positive things that can come out of it. Trifina, I see that you have your hand up. Do you have something to add?
Yeah, and so I just wanted to start off first by saying I've been a follower for John Maxwell for years, read his books, listened to his seminars. And one quote that I actually have in my bio, which I'll share before I talk about the extending up or down, but I include in my bio, it says, leaders must be close enough to relate to others, but far enough ahead to motivate them. And so I think, you know, given this, and as far as when you talk about influence, one thing that I'm really working on right now is that influence up, and like that both ways, really. I feel like I'm comfortable with my peers, and I'm also working on reaching down. I have did mentorship programs for youth for a while now, but really being able to listen to them and learn from them, because again, you know, even though I may be able to help them identify some skill sets or, you know, build their knowledge base, they're able to do the same. And so letting them know that to keep them motivated and encouraged to be able to not only influence their peers, but also people that are being mentors to them. Yeah. But you talked about the fear and the breakthrough. And one thing that I have done over the years is work with a coach, because my fear was always being in a room where I didn't speak the language, or I didn't feel like I was qualified enough to be able to share. But knowing now that I really added a lot to that room, that space, given just from my perception or where I have came from and my lived experiences. And so I don't have to be the expert in everything, but my point of view is important to be able to share so that others can learn from it, and then we can learn together. I just wanted to add that.
Wow, yeah, fantastic point.
Yeah, and thank you for being here. This session really is a testament to your circle of influence, because there's someone here because you suggested that they come, and they trust you enough to take your word for it and think, okay, she says that's somewhere that I need to be there. So thank you for that. Amy, I saw that your hand came up. You can come off of mute.
Oh, you're talking on mute.
Now I'm off mute, sorry. I am just loving all of the input. Thank you, Steve. You shared so many, I think, great reminders and presented them in a way that just felt really, I guess, personal, relatable, which was excellent. I would also just say that, speaking to support what you said, it is so clear when you see the difference when you're empowering other people to be successful, when you do all that you can to build others up and give them the confidence to be successful in what they do. It creates such an incredible feeling of team. It makes all the difference, and you just get so much further with your team members and your colleagues. And you know, it's interesting, I hadn't really thought about, and Jessica mentioned this when she spoke first, the influencing people upward. That's just not something you always, I think of. So that was really great advice. And I think that's going to be an area that I focus on. And, you know, I have to laugh. I know there's a couple people on here, one in particular, my colleague, Dawn, it was probably laughing because I'm forever saying we facilitate an employability skills training program for teens. And I always say, you know, why do we think that everybody can be a leader? Because not everybody can be a leader. But now that I've heard you today, at 52 years old, you're convincing me that, okay, maybe I don't know everything like I think I do. So thank you.
I think it really comes from the old business adage that leaders have a title, right?
Right.
And we really don't. I didn't share it this time, but I teach at Pine Knob. I'm a ski instructor there.
Okay.
and I teach a junior race program that has, in my team, it's usually 5-year-old to 7-year-old. And about 3 years ago, I had 7-year-old girls, and we all know if you're around 7-year-old girls, they never shut up. They just talk, 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 talk. And I had one 5-year-old boy. So the division, you had division right there. It's like, ew, yucky boy, 7 girls, right? And they would come down the course, and I'm like, hey, girls, you got to do this, got to do that, got to do that. And little Jack, who's 5 years old, ran the course, and he's like, Coach Steve, can I go? And I'm like, yeah, go. You stay at the bottom. I saw those girls weren't listening to me. I was the coach. I was positional with them. I'm looking at the bottom of the hill, and here's Jack pointing up the hill and kind of doing this with his hands. And these girls were like all about Jack. I'm thinking, who has influence, me or Jack? Well, guess what? It was 5-year-old Jack. And to this day, he's not on my team anymore because he's such a good skier. We moved him up. Those girls still go to him after 3 years because they had such a connection. I wasn't a dad, or he wasn't a dad. He had the influence with those girls more than I did. Now they listened to me, but that first few days they listened to Jack because I didn't have the results. I didn't, as soon as they found out, that we were getting results, they were winning medals, right? Now they're starting to listen to me. But those first 2 meetings, the coach was Jack, not me.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah,
I would
and-
say
oh,
you're the
sorry.
first person. I'm sorry, Bree. You're just the first person who's been able to convince me that, okay, we do all have the ability to lead from where we are. It's different, and it's not necessarily that we are in charge of a group, but instead, what are we doing in day to day, whether it's personal at home, whether it's in our work environments. So thank you. That's a pretty incredible lesson for me today.
Yeah, and it's such a way of thinking that's been ingrained in our brain. Like Steve said, leaders have titles, and people miss that aspect of growth because we think like, okay, well, if we get a promotion, that's our growth opportunity. But Steve shared a ton of growth opportunities that we encounter on a daily basis, coming in contact with the bad influences of our life, listening to, our circle of influence back and forth. Those are all growth opportunities. They don't always just come out of promotion. And what a transformational idea for our business and organizations to adopt this mindset that we are all leaders. We can lead from every level, just as the series says. But I made a comment earlier in the chat of what a transformational idea for our community too. If we take that influence beyond the 4 walls of our workplace into our homes, into our community interactions, it really is a change that can spread all over. And so having, the 30-something leaders that signed up for this series, that's just the start of that transformation. And I'm so excited for all of us to be adopting this new way of thinking, hopefully. Kelsey says here in the chat that she wants to work on influence side to side. So influence our mid-level managers and also be people of influence with their teams, coworkers, and customers. So again, creating those producers there, that's great. Donna says, taking it a step further, we may need to take time to establish a common understanding of what value is. So what value added truly means. Steve, do you have any comments on that?
Yeah, I mean, value is, it's different to everyone, right? I have really, to me, it boils down to just serving others, right? So if I'm serving someone in their needs, in their growth, I'm adding value to them. I'm not taking value away from them. I'm actually adding value to them by kind of following this a little bit of acrostic, listening to them, getting a good understanding of where they are today, where they want to go, maybe even an understanding or validate of a concern. I really think it's about that's why I love this little acrostic, because to me, adding value is these words. Am I helping reproduce? Am I empowering them? Am I consistently working on connecting with them? Because if I want to add value to them and I meet them once, am I really adding value to them if I don't see them 6 months from now or a year from now? do I have a real tight connection with them, from a work wise, from a personal wise, and all the other wise that you could have a connection with them? Am I helping them get to where they want to go? Am I navigating certain planes with them that says, they say, hey, I'm really struggling in, understanding my own personal values. Well, let's work together to help you find your identity and your values. So I think it's really coming from an approach of an open-handedness, serving posture mindset, as opposed to follow me and just listen to me. It's a two-way conversation. And when I add value to someone, it's a two-way conversation. It's a two-way connection, not just one way.
Yeah, and when I think of value, I think of pouring into others. And Jessica made a comment earlier that kind of hit the nail on the head. I love the concept of creating an influence net where we are all working to influence each other rather than only taking from those around us. And I made an additional comment to that, instead of, or thinking of, how do I add value to you? Or how do I pour into you, instead of how can I one up you? Or how can I get something out of you? It's really just adding value can be as simple as a shift in your mindset. It doesn't have to be something that produces results right away, or, something that you can put a number to or a metric to, but really just that simple change in your mindset of how do I add value to you, instead of what can I get from you, or what can you do for me?
She's frozen. Oh, there she is.
Yep. Okay, we've got about 3 minutes left here. Any
So
additional
I think it
thoughts?
is.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, you're fine.
I was just going to say, there's in one of John's book, Leader Shift, I use the analogy for someone are extending without any expectations of return.
Yes, that's a great way to put it. Okay, so we are coming to the top of the hour here. Liz, I loved this presentation and engaging conversation. Thank you so much, Liz. This is exactly what I hope to get out of the remaining 3 sessions that we have going forward in this series. But those who signed up for the series, that will also come with a Leadership Toolbox email that you're going to get this afternoon and Tuesday afternoons for the next 8 weeks. A lot of these concepts that we talked about, we're going to work on in bite-sized chunks. So we don't want to take on all of this at one time. It'll really be broken up. And, how do we define value to ourselves? How do we take ownership of our personal development? That's what this afternoon's toolbox is really going to focus on. If you didn't sign up for the entire series, but you're interested in doing so, feel free to shoot me an email and we'll get you into those series. So today we talked about becoming a person of influence. In 2 weeks, we're going to build off of that and talk about authentic leadership, what that looks like, being our true selves. So I'm looking forward to that. Any additional questions before we wrap up today? Give a minute for the chat. Steve, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh,
you always
Brianna,
add so much value to us, and we appreciate it.
Feel free to share my contact information if anyone has questions or any additional, services, coaching, whatever. We can have a conversation. So feel free.
I will be sure to do that. Thank you. All right, everyone. Think of how you can take 1 or 2 of these practices and adapt it into your day today. Keep an eye out for the Leadership Toolbox that'll be sent over this afternoon, and we will see you back here in a live in-person session in 2 weeks.
Thank you, everyone. I appreciate your time.
Thank you.